Good afternoon and welcome to INSELA's webinar, Meeting the Needs of Students with Interrupted Formal Education and Refugee Backgrounds. Today presenting on this important topic, we have Joanne Urrutia, the Deputy Director of OELA, Millie Bentley-Memon, also from the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Elementary and Secondary Education, D. Daniel Scriven and Regine Hagos from the Office of Refugee Resettlement in the Office of Health and Human Services, and Teddy Pradaris joining us from Fairfax County Public Schools. Today's webinar will run approximately an hour and a half, and we're going to provide some time at the end for you to ask and answer questions, although you are welcome to put your questions in at any time in the chat box that you'll see on the left-hand side of the webinar window. This webinar will be archived, so if you have colleagues who were not able to make it to today's session, they'll be able to review the webinar through INSELA's website. The PowerPoint for the webinar also is currently available on INSELA's website if people would like to follow along with the PowerPoint. I'm now going to turn over to Joanne Urrutia, the Deputy Director of the Office of English Language Acquisition at the U.S. Department of Education.
Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties. Welcome everyone. This is Joanne Urrutia from the Office of English Language Acquisition. We come together this afternoon with folks from various areas of expertise, both at the Department of Education and also from one of our school districts, to address one of the many issues that the field has been addressing in terms of the heterogeneous groups of ELs. For many years, we have treated the group of ELs as a one type of students, and that they all have the same needs. But as we all know, English learners come in all shapes and sizes. We have gifted ELs, we have students with disabilities who are also English learners, we have native born, we have immigrants, and in this particular case that we're going to address today, we have that special subgroup of students who have had interrupted formal education due to a series of events in their countries that they come from. This special group is one that is the most challenging, particularly when they get to us at an age that is past elementary school. We need to take a closer look and develop, implement, and evaluate language instructional programs that are effective with this particular population, which has so many challenges. So I welcome our speakers today here, and hopefully the discussion will be one that will be fruitful and provide the participants with information that they can use at their own districts. Thank you very much, and now I will hand it over to Millie.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. This is Millie Bentley-Memon of the Title III group, and I'm sitting in today for Sapreet Anand, who's on business travel this week. And Sapreet wanted me to just quickly share the context for this presentation with you today. I'll just build a little bit on what Joanne just shared, as well as Kira. First, we wanted to share with you, as Joanne mentioned, that the impetus for this presentation, why it's very important, is the need to recognize and understand the diversity of our English learner population. So today we'll talk about two groups of students within the English learner student population: students with interrupted formal education, SIFE students, and students with refugee backgrounds. Second, this webinar is an update to the August 2011 webinar on refugee students in U.S. public schools that our colleagues at the Office of Refugee Resettlement at the Department of Health and Human Services, otherwise known as HHS, created for you. So we are delighted that we have our colleagues who came back who are also from another federal agency and will be here to speak with you today. Third, this webinar includes an example of a local program that serves SIFE and refugee background students. This program is in Fairfax County, Virginia. It's one of many examples of promising practices throughout the nation. But we wanted you to know about this program to assist you when you provide technical assistance to your districts if you're a state Title III director. And finally, if you haven't done so already, states and others, we encourage you after this webinar to think about how best to assist your customers, whether it be LEAs or schools that serve SIFE and refugee students in your state, and to consider thinking about effective programming that can be used by districts and schools to serve these students. So I'll turn it over to our colleagues Dee and Resine from the Office of Refugee Resettlement at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Millie. And I wanted to thank the Department of Education's Office of Elementary and Secondary Education and the Office of English Language Acquisition for inviting us to present, and also a big thank you to NCELA for hosting this webinar. Good afternoon. My name is Dee Daniel Scriven, and I work with the Office of Refugee Resettlement in the Office of the Director. And here's my slide presentation. And first, I just wanted to give you an overview of what we're going to be covering today. We will cover ORR in brief, the populations whom we serve, refugee children, recent statistics, the Refugee School Impact Grant, other resources that you may find helpful. And finally, at the end, we'll have a question and answer session at the end of both presentations. So if you have any questions, please feel free to either chat them or jot them down and ask us at the end. Briefly, the Office of Refugee Resettlement is located within the Administration for Children and Families in the Department of Health and Human Services. So what populations does ORR serve? We provide services to a variety of populations for a time-limited period, and your school systems may serve children from any of these population categories. I'm just going to go briefly over each category. Refugees are people who are unable or unwilling to return to their home country because they have been persecuted or have a well-founded fear of persecution based on their race, religion, nationality, member of a social group, or political opinion. Only 1% of the entire global refugee population are referred for resettlement in a third country, and the Department of Homeland Security, with the Department of State, facilitates the process overseas for refugees to come to the U.S. Asylees basically fit the same definition as a refugee, but they manage to travel to the U.S. and are granted asylum when they are here. Cuban Haitian entrants are people from Cuba or Haiti who are paroled under refugee status or have pending asylum applications. Amerasians are people from Vietnam whose father was a U.S. soldier in the Vietnam War. Special immigrant visa holders from Iraq and Afghanistan are Iraqi and Afghani men and women who helped U.S. military forces overseas during the Iraq and Afghan wars. And certified victims of trafficking, this is where ORR works with law enforcement and other NGOs nationwide to certify adult victims of trafficking and provide eligibility letters for children who are victims of trafficking. We also serve unaccompanied alien children. These are children under 18 years old with no legal status who come to the country alone. And ORR provides shelter, medical, and educational services for them until they are released to a sponsor or are returned to their home country. So I just wanted to show you this slide to let you know that refugees are Americans in waiting. After 1 year, refugees are required to apply for a green card or legal permanent residence. And at 5 years from their date of admission into the U.S., refugees may apply for U.S. citizenship. And most other ORR populations, like asylees, SIVs, and Amerasians, also have their green card or can have it within a year and be on the path to citizenship. I also wanted to show you are projections for FY13. The three main populations ORR serves are refugees, which includes unaccompanied refugee minors, asylees, and Cuban Haitian entrants. And for the first time in FY13, you'll see that the unaccompanied alien children projection is also at 20,000, very sizable. So I wanted to show you a slide of just that growth that we've seen in the UAC program, only because you may be serving these children if they've been released to a sponsor who is usually a parent or a relative residing in the U.S. As I said before, the UAC have no legal status upon entry, but they may gain legal status. And if you can look at the FY11 and compare it to the FY12, it's basically doubled in number. And we're not really sure the exact reason for this, but the population we're seeing are mainly boys from 14 to 17 years old, the SIFE population, and they're mainly Spanish-speaking from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. We also wanted to go over historical arrival patterns. As you know, the U.S. is a country of immigrants, and although the U.S. refugee program officially started in 1980, there were waves of refugees before that, after various global humanitarian crises. And the top line here represents the presidential determination for the annual admission ceiling for refugees. That's made every fiscal year, and as you can see, we have never met it. The closest we came was in 2009, and you can also see, if you track the ebbs and flows, the big drop that happened after September 11th. And if you look at FY12, we have a little over 58,000 refugees arrive, but this data is not yet reconciled. And for FY13, we are on schedule for the first 2 quarters, and the Department of State says that we are en route to meeting the ceiling this year. So what countries are represented? I just wanted to briefly go over this. The top 5 countries of origin for refugee arrivals in FY11 are Burma, Bhutan, although the Bhutanese refugees are ethnically Nepali, Iraq, Somalia, and Cuba. And it's very interesting if you look at the asylee graph, the top 5 countries, there are no overlap with the refugee countries. The top country is China, and then we have very close numbers for Venezuela, Ethiopia, and Egypt, and the last top 5 is Haiti. So we wanted to try to bring this back down to the children. So we have this slide. We wanted to show you the last few fiscal years of data of ORR school-age children who have arrived. The columns in gray are the total number of refugee children who arrived in a given fiscal year, and the column in red represents the total number of refugee, asylee, Cuban Haitian entrant, and SIV children. And this does not include unaccompanied alien children. And as you can see, more children came in during FY10 than FY11 and possibly FY12, although, as I said before, we don't have reconciled FY12 data yet, or the total number of arrivals for FY12. So we broke that down in ages 12 to 18, mainly secondary school populations, and this is FY10 and FY11 data. The FY10 numbers are higher, close to or surpassing 2,000 students in each age group. And you're probably still serving the children from FY10 and 11 who are 16 years old or younger. And the FY11 numbers are closer to and just surpassing 15,000 students across all age groups. I also wanted to show you ages 9 to 11, and most of whom you are probably serving now or will be serving shortly. And again, the FY10 numbers are higher, closer to 1,800 for each age, and the FY11 numbers are between 1,400 and 1,600. Finally, one last slide, I promise, with statistics. Just trying to make it more applicable to you as a state administrator. This slide shows FY11 arrivals for children under 18 years old. It includes refugees, asylees, Cuban Haitian entrants, and SIVs. And once again, it doesn't include UACs. And the states in cream received under 100 arrivals in FY11. We have 12 states in mauve who received between 101 and 250. States in gray, 6 of them, between 251 to 500 arrivals in FY11. The states in brown, we have 9 of them, 501 to 750 arrivals. And states in pink, 750 to 751 to 1,000. We have 5 of those. And then finally, we have 6 states over 1,000, and those are in red. And the top state with the top arrivals is Florida, due to the Cuban-Haitian entrant population. But even if you were to take away that number, Florida would still be in red, having served over 1,000 children. So with all those stats, I wanted to just bring a picture, because a picture speaks 1,000 words. This is a picture of a cramped basement in Syria's Sadai Zanab neighborhood, where a volunteer teacher is giving free catch-up classes to Iraqi school children in hopes that they will be able to join Syrian students at the start of the school year. If you look closely at their faces and their body language, I'm assuming that the teacher is speaking their same language here. The children are engaged and motivated. They understand what they're being taught. So who are refugee children? I believe that they're the future professionals of the U.S. They come here a lot of times not voluntarily, but they want the American dream, and they just need the supports to do it. So now I'll hand it over to my colleague, Razene, who will talk about the Refugee School Impact Grant.
Hello everybody, my name is Razene. Hello everybody, my name is Razene, and I happen to be the manager of the Refugee School Impact Grant. And following this briefing, she briefed us on the process, profile, and numbers of refugee population, and I'm going to concentrate on the education of a specific group within this. We are now talking about school-age children who normally make up 30 to 40% of all refugees resettled in the U.S., especially now with the influx of unaccompanied children coming through the southern borders. We are talking about children who have come from different countries with varied academic and cultural backgrounds and life experience. This program is meant to help school children who are bound to face all kinds of challenges adapting to a new environment for American schools. Challenges are academic, cultural, psychosocial. Refugee parents too have their own cultural, linguistic, and other barriers preventing them from actively involving themselves in the education of their kids. Therefore, this program is meant to overcome all these hardships and help refugee children compete with mainstream American children in their academic pursuit. Now I'm going to give you a few words about the program. And the Refugee School Impact Grant Program is a $15 million discretionary program administered through states and or their designees. Currently, 39 states participate in the program. Roughly some 100,000 refugee students, 40% of whom are newly arrived refugee children, and the rest, about 63,000, are those who arrived in the last 3 years, but for varied reasons were not able to overcome their academic challenges. So these are expected to benefit from this program. The grant project period is 2 years. Current 2-year funding cycle running between 8/15/2012 to 8/14/2014. Grants range from $150,000 annually for smaller programs to $1 million for larger programs. State grantees subcontract State Department of Education, voluntary resettlement agencies, or other educational institutions and service providers to ensure the provision of proposed activities under the grant. The program aims to assist schools impacted by a high number of refugee children. Awards, however, are not based solely on population numbers. In addition, ORR considers the adequate documentation of the service needs of the population to be served and the strength of the applicant's proposed program services. ORR gives priority to those applicants that have limited resources but have proposed viable means to attain linguistic and cultural competence in order to meet the needs of new refugee populations using requested funds. Now I'm going to deal with the kind of activities we consider under this project. This is something you all have been doing for so long, I wouldn't want to go into details, and therefore chose to make brief remarks on some that I thought are relevant for our purpose now. English as a second language instruction. Very few of these young refugees come from educated and affluent background, and hence English language may not be a problem. But the large majority are poor and have limited education and hence need to go through ASL programs to survive. Usually one-on-one and small group tutoring is given to them to enhance their understanding of class lessons. After school, summer programs support remedial work or promote school readiness. These activities are mainly academic, recreational, and psychosocial, and are carried out including in the evenings and or weekends. To many refugee parents, the concept of direct parental involvement in the education of their children is already a strange phenomenon. The teacher is considered to be all-knowing authority, that there is no need for them to involve other than perhaps telling their children to do their homework, etc. In addition, parents also face linguistic, cultural, and economic challenges. So the program will have to assist parents overcome all these if their children are to succeed in their academic pursuit. The program provides parent education for refugee parents, which may include touring the schools, meeting the principal and teachers, inviting guest speakers from the schools to talk to parents at their apartment complex about what the school expects of students and their parents, helping refugee parents understand the ways to communicate with the school, phone calls, parent-teacher meetings, report cards, etc., helping refugee parents understand process and the expectations of the schools, including enrollment, immunizations, excused and unexcused absence, etc. Interpretation, translation services. Need for interpreter services, mainly for parent-teacher meetings and conference. Translation of letters, notice, school news, student code of conduct, directives, flyers, and even technical documents like mathematics, science glossary are done under this program. Bilingual, bicultural counselors and aides. This can be school employees, full-time or part-time, or volunteers who would help children cope up with educational and cultural issues both inside and outside class. Tutoring. After-school tutorials are focused on helping students understand and complete assignments. Programs that encourage high school completion and full participation in school activities. Such services are usually given in apartment complex where there is a problem of transport. School liaison services. These are meant to liaise between refugee resettlement agencies, schools, and refugee family, advocate for refugee students and their families to make sure that schools understand the law about providing interpreters. Many do not know that. Advocate for students and their families when there are discipline problems or other issues at school, and educating parents on their rights and responsibilities, etc. Student success. The following indicators are used to measure whether the activities allowed in the last slide have helped attain these outcomes. A, teacher training, parent school orientation, and student school orientation, English language acquisition, academic performance, conduct reports, unexcused absence, and self-initiative. The first three indicators mentioned here are to be reported by service providers or schools semi-annually, and the rest will have to be reported yearly. Not all our SIG programs are funded to provide services for all components, so service providers are expected to report only on those they receive funding for. Following that, then we have got good practices. Sometimes they are referred as best practices. And talking about good practices, each state obviously has its own practice or model based on objective conditions there. However, the ones listed here are seen as practices relevant to all or many because they have been used by relatively successful programs. school districts, school partnering with local community organizations. There is a need to nurture supportive relationships bringing together technical education expertise from schools and cultural and linguistic expertise by community organizations. Example, Washington State conducts its programs by involving 8 school districts and 19 community organizations. Talking about the strong and focused programs of connection between parent-child, parent-school, and school community, here we mean relationships between students, collaborative projects, advisory groups, relationships between students and teacher, other school-based adults, example advisory groups, reaching out words towards students, relationship between school and parents, accommodating parent schedules for parent-teacher meetings, reaching out through parent liaisons, parenting, relationship between school and the community, inviting in community leaders for discussions, relationships across ethnic, racial, country of origin groups, intercultural sensitivity, sharing cultural knowledge, information practice, etc. Partnerships capable of garnering non-RR funding, volunteers, or support. Once again, the program carried out in Washington State benefited from the Department of Education's Title I, Title III funds to support after-school and summer school programs. Virginia's program continued association with Virginia ESL Supervisors Association, Virginia Department of Education's Title I and III, etc. to support this program. Professional development for school and participating community partners, services given to school districts. The program provides training to teachers and administrators, which includes an explanation of the refugee resettlement program, cultural backgrounds of refugee groups, the unique educational needs of refugee students, and other information as specified as specific needs arise. Volunteers also attend training throughout the year with the topics of the training determined by the greatest need at the time, such as teaching, literacy, etc. Proper data collection and documentation, helpful for monitoring, evaluation purpose, and of course for reporting results of outcomes as well. Having said that, I would like to make some remarks with regards to this particular webinar, and that is refugees with interrupted formal education, with the exception of perhaps Iraqis and Afghanis and a few others coming from, example, Europe somewhere. The majority of the rest could be safely categorized as SIFE. There are refugees who have had regular schooling even in refugee camps, but the level of education, medium of instruction used would easily categorize them in this category. Otherwise, most have never had any education in refugee camps. Some got their education disrupted for a number of years, etc. So the educational problems refugees face are so varied, each case will have to be treated on its own merit. All the refugee children, there are many refugees who enter high school at the age of 16 or 17 with little or no formal education. Some of these students obviously are not welcomed by many schools because they cannot earn all the required academic credits necessary to earn a diploma or a GED. These are perceived as dropouts who would adversely affect the rating of the schools. However, this challenge will have to be faced, as is the case in Virginia, where the Code of Virginia allows residents to be enrolled in public schools to the age of 22. Virginia is committed to serve about 1,700 refugee children who are between the ages 17 and 22 in its current program. I'm sure Teddy will enlighten us more on this. Hope the rest would follow. Thank you very much.
Great. So I'm just going to keep going through these slides. You've looked at this slide for a little while. The basic gist of this slide is just to let you know that refugees, unlike other immigrant children, have status, and they're very like U.S.-born children in that they can access mainstream benefits. Also, unaccompanied refugee minor children in states access services that are available to domestic foster care children in their state. We wanted to give you some resources that you could access. On the main page of our website, you'll find this map, and if you click on your state, you'll find contact information for your state refugee coordinator, state refugee health coordinator, and ORR state analyst. You'll also find formula and discretionary grant amounts and contact information for grantees, usually refugee service providers. So if you would like to work with refugee service providers to provide outreach to parents or seek to align funding with RSIG programs in your state, this would be a good place to go. I also wanted to let you know about the ORR stakeholders and some of the information in our network. By regulation, each state refugee coordinator is required to have quarterly stakeholder meetings where you can learn more about the local resettlement network, find resources, opportunities to collaborate, and raise concerns if you have them. If LEAs in your state are looking for mentors or tutors for refugee children, ethnic community-based organizations may be a good place to go. They may have contacts with bright former refugee college students. ICF is one of ORR's current technical assistance providers, and they are developing an online hub with a global calendar for ORR stakeholders, so this may be a future reference. And BRICS used to be a former technical assistance provider. Now they're providing technical assistance only to our UAC program. But they have a great website, a tab for schools with items addressing ethnic conflicts and foreign transcript evaluation, among others. And they also have a SIFE resource page with almost 20 PowerPoints, brief articles, and books from various educational entities abroad and local, like the Calgary Board of Education, Indiana Department of Education, New York City Advocates, and others. These other resources we wanted to let you know about, the UNHCR website, they have several tabs on their website. One is Who We Help with a section on children's issues. There's also a tab called Where We Work if you want information on a specific region. CAL is a private nonprofit organization. It has been around for over 40 years and has worked in the field of ESL, dialect studies, language policy, refugee orientation, and also educating linguistically and culturally diverse adults and children. CAL has a special project called the Cultural Orientation Resource Center, and they just revised an orientation guide that is being used with refugees for overseas and domestic orientation. This guide's pretty long, almost 200 some pages, but it has one chapter on education that defines what refugee parents can expect. So if you wanted to see what refugee parents may be seeing abroad, this would be a good place to go. Finally, the RPC, funded by the Department of State, they put out a lot of data, regular reports, including monthly reports on arriving refugees, broken down by national origin and city of arrival, top languages used, etc. And here is our contact information if you have further questions. And I see some of the questions in chat, so hopefully we'll be able to get to those. And we'll also have question and answer session, I believe, at the end of the whole presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are now ready to turn over to the second part of today's presentation, which is Teddy Prizaras from Fairfax County Public Schools.
Good afternoon. This is Teddy Prizaras. I'm the Director of the Office of Language Acquisition and Title I in the Instructional Services Department of Fairfax County Public Schools in Fairfax, Virginia. It's my great pleasure to be with you here this afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank the U.S. Department of Education and NCELA for inviting us here this afternoon to share information on best practices in meeting the needs of students with interrupted formal education and refugee background. Today we'd like to share some of those best practices that we're implementing in Fairfax. To give you some background information about our school division, Fairfax County Public Schools is the 11th largest school district in the country. We're located right outside of Washington, D.C. in the Metro D.C. area. We cover an entire county in Virginia, which is over 400 square miles, and we have 196 schools and centers. Our students come to us from 200 countries and represent over 160 different language groups. To provide an overview of our demographics, our total school population this year in grades K through 12 is 180,282 students. Of those, approximately 45%, or over 81,000 students, are language minority students who live in a home where a language other than or in addition to English is spoken. Of those students, approximately 36,000 students are English learners or limited English proficient, as the terminology is used in the federal legislation. Our English learner population is approximately 20% of our total population, or 1 of every 5 students. This chart delineates our most prevalent language groups. As you can see, our top language groups include Spanish, Korean, Arabic, Vietnamese, Mandarin, Urdu, and Farsi. The top 7 groups I just named make up approximately 3/4 of our language minority population in Fairfax County Public Schools. Our school board and our leadership team highly value and respect our diversity, and they're very committed to supporting every student in reaching their full academic potential. Some of the following philosophical underpinnings highlighted in our school division's belief statements, vision, and goals demonstrate this commitment to an academic environment conducive to learning for all students. 2 of our belief statements are that an educated citizenry is critical to sustaining our economy and our system of self-governance, and also that our diversity creates resilient, open, and innovative citizens of our global community. 2 of our vision statements are that we value our diversity and acknowledge that all people contribute to the well-being of the community, and also that we measure the academic progress to ensure that every single student, regardless of race, poverty, language background, or disability, will graduate with the knowledge and skills necessary for college and employment. In other words, that every student be college and career ready. We have student achievement goals for all Fairfax students. 3 very important ones of our student achievement goals that I'd like to highlight are the following. First of all, that all students will achieve their full academic potential. Another goal we have for all students is that every student will learn to communicate in at least 2 languages by the time they graduate. Also, students will learn to understand the interrelationship and interdependence of the countries and cultures of the world. To achieve these goals in Fairfax County Public Schools, all schools work as professional learning communities that employ best practices of teaching and learning to raise the bar for all students, as well as close the achievement gap with our subgroups. In order to achieve our goal that all students will graduate with full academic potential and graduate high school, we need to constantly develop as well as refine and modify programs that we have to meet the ever-changing and evolving needs of our diverse demographics in our student population. So we're in a cycle of continuous and constant improvement, ever evolving. To begin the enrollment process in Fairfax County Public Schools, after completing a home language survey, all language minority students and their families register with bilingual registrars at one of our 3 registration sites. At these sites, we also have community liaisons that provide new families to FCPS with resources in the community. The students are assessed with an English language proficiency assessment that is part of the WIDA assessment system to determine ELP level, their English language proficiency level. Students' transcripts, records, and educational history, as well as their assessment scores, are reviewed together to make programmatic recommendations to families. And if no records are available, an oral educational history is documented through a parent interview. Our state is part of the 30-state WIDA consortium, and we use the WIDA English Language Proficiency Assessment and Level System. And this is an overview of the system just to show you our levels. Level 1 is a beginning level of English language proficiency called the entering level. Up through level 6. Level 6 is considered English proficient. And in Virginia, our levels 1 through 5 are considered English learners or LEP students. As students enroll in FCPS, we focus on the specific strengths and needs of the individual student, and we recommend the most appropriate placement for each of them based on their individual strengths and needs. For our students with interrupted formal education, we have 3 major options that are available for them to work towards completing a high school diploma. The vast majority of our students do go on to their neighborhood-based middle or high school. We also have a special program I'll be speaking about called our Transitional ESOL High School program, as well as alternative high schools and adult high schools. We'll describe each of these as each one of these options leads to a high school diploma. In our base, middle, and high schools, we teach academic English through content. In other words, content-based ESOL. We do have ESOL, English for Speakers of Other Language Services, at every middle and high school, as well as every elementary in Fairfax County Public Schools. So we focus on teaching academic language through the content areas with a focus and emphasis on learning the grade level content area standards. We supplement this by providing online supplementary summer ESOL courses. And a key point I'd like to highlight is that we provide professional development to all of our ESOL teachers in our middle and our high schools on how to differentiate instruction for students who are developing literacy. In other words, students who may have interrupted formal education. And so we provide them special training within their ongoing in-service professional development of how to work specifically with the needs of these students. We have also advocated with our state in the early 90s, and we are able now to provide, since then, free public education in Fairfax for English learners who come to us at the secondary age up through age 22. This is an additional 2 years beyond the upper limit at which general education students are able to stay in high school, which is age 20. The next program I'd like to mention is our Transitional ESOL High School program. This is a special program we developed as we saw the ongoing needs of our students with interrupted formal education increasing. This program is designed for students who are age 18 and over. This program offers classes beginning in the late afternoon and going into the evening. So this serves the needs of students who need to work during the day to support their families or perhaps need to babysit siblings. So all of the courses are offered in the late afternoon and evening time. The primary group of students this serves are students who are at English Language Proficiency Level 1 or 2. These are very beginning level students. And again, the vast majority of students for whom this is an appropriate program are students with interrupted or limited previous schooling. Most of the students for whom this is an appropriate choice have fewer than 10 high school credits that they're transferring in from their home country. We provide this program at high schools at 4 sites that are geographically dispersed throughout our county that are also on public transportation routes. And we use these high schools after hours after the daytime students have gone home. The website at the bottom of this slide is a link directly to tell you more information about the transitional program. Additionally, the transitional program provides introductory transitional courses that are necessary as a foundation to work towards a regular high school diploma. They are the entry courses, the beginning transitional courses students need to be successful in subsequent courses. The courses offered at the transitional high school program are beginning levels of ESOL Language Arts, levels 1 and 2, also an ESOL Concept Science course, ESOL Concept Social Studies course, and math for their level. Again, these ESOL Science and Social Studies courses, as well as math, provide the basic content concepts as well as the academic language students will need as a foundation to be successful in subsequent courses in those academic content areas. Additionally, we provide a variety of other special supports for the students with interrupted formal education at our transitional ESOL high school programs. Special events such as career nights, where we invite members of the community, business partners, and community organizations to come in and speak about their careers and the paths they took and the kinds of necessary requirements to go into those careers. We sponsor field trips to the Metro Washington, D.C. area for special events. We publish writings of the students so they can see their own work in print, and also provide yearbooks that are compiled and presented for each of the sites to create a sense of community within each of the programs. The sites are staffed by contracted, certified full-time ESOL teachers. These are the same contracts that we offer our daytime ESOL teachers, just with different hours. And we also have bilingual counselors at each of the sites to provide additional support. From this program, which is a foundation, the transitional program, as the name implies, students can transfer to one of our alternative or adult high schools to complete their high school diploma. And they may do this at their own rate and pace, which is appropriate for them in their particular individual or personal situation. Students 18 and over can transfer to either the alternative or adult high school to earn each of the remaining credits they need for the regular diploma. For the adult high school program, there is no upper age limit. Our alternative programs are geared towards students ages 17 through 22. We do provide free tuition for all of these programs up through age 22 for our English learners, and there is a slight tuition charge for students who are over 22. The alternative and adult high schools have some daytime as well as evening schedules to accommodate the diverse needs of the students. We have other programs in addition for students 18 and over. However, our expectation and goal is for all students to graduate with a high school diploma, regardless of the amount of time it might take. We do tailor and model our programs to meet the individual needs of students. Some students are seeking a GED. We do provide preparation and classes for that in both English and Spanish, as well as the assessment in both English and Spanish. We also have a national external diploma program that is a credit by objective program for students 21 and over with real-life experience. We offer adult ESOL classes. Those are non-credit bearing classes for students who may already have a high school diploma from their home country who want to add on a ESOL proficiency, English proficiency. And we also have a family literacy program where adults and children learn English together. And again, that is a non-credit program offered at many of our elementary schools. So our goal in Fairfax County Public Schools is to prepare all of our students to be college and or career ready. We want our students to be empowered with 21st century skills to compete in today's global economy, and we want them to be prepared to be successful members of our global community. In this last slide, we have contact information for you. There is my name and email. I'd also like to highlight the names and emails of our pre-K-12 ESOL coordinators, Sam Klein and Dorina Walsh. Shelley Gutstein is the administrator of our transitional ESOL high school program. If you'd like more specific information on that program, you may contact her directly. And finally, our Fairfax County Public Schools website that gives information about our entire ESOL program, including all the programs I mentioned today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Teddy and to our earlier presenters, Dee and Regine. I'm going to move now to questions. We have some questions that you folks have already entered into the chat box, but do feel free to continue to enter questions in the chat box as we move through. We have time for quite a lot of questions today. We have gone faster through our slides than we had thought, so we do have time for a number of questions. So I'm going to ask first of all the questions that I have that are maybe more appropriate to the folks from the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Andre Guerrero asks, if an unaccompanied minor arrives from Mexico as an economic refugee, why or why not might that student's status be covered under the programs being discussed?
Thanks, Kira, for the question, and thank you to Andre as well. So I'm just going to try to explain a little bit about the Unaccompanied Alien Child Program with ORR. Hold on one second. I'm sorry, Kira, am I interrupting you, or are there technical difficulties?
Dee, we can hear you perfectly fine. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. So getting back to Andre's question, if an unaccompanied minor arrives from Mexico as an economic refugee, why or why not is their status covered? The Unaccompanied Alien Child Program at ORR serves unaccompanied alien children who come into the U.S. and are referred by the Department of Homeland Security. These children can come because they're trafficked over, because they've been abused or neglected, because they're coming for economic reasons, for a variety of reasons. But ORR does not question why they've come over. We basically just serve anyone who the Department of Homeland Security refers to us. Once they're in our care, we provide them with shelter, education, health services, and then we look to reunify them with sponsors that are on the ground while they await their immigration proceedings. Because any unaccompanied alien child that comes into the country is automatically going to be put into deportation proceedings. They will try to gain immigration status when they're here, and if they gain status, our program no longer covers them. And if they're released to a sponsor, a parent or a relative, then ORR's program no longer covers them as well. So if they're released to a parent or a relative in the U.S. in any state, then that parent or relative may take that child to their local public school, but ORR has no jurisdiction over that. So I hope I've answered your question. Please let me know if there's something that I missed. Thank you.
I have another participant asking, what program allows refugees to be enrolled in public school until age 22? If one of our presenters could field that question.
So I think that question was when Rosene mentioned a program in Virginia, and Teddy Prederis actually went over that as well in Fairfax County, how they worked with the government to extend EL learners up to age 22. That basically was the same example and the same program.
Well, basically, according to Virginia's program, regular high school programs are ready to accept anybody coming to school until the age of 22. So maybe Teddy can help us in that regard better.
Perhaps I could dovetail with that response. This is Teddy Prederis from Fairfax. In Virginia, we advocated with the state to changed state legislation that would allow local education agencies to be able to offer free public education up through age 22. So we worked with the state legislature to make that change. That change was put into place in the early 1990s. Then it was up to every local education agency and their governing school board to determine if they would offer those services or not. So it did need to go through a local school board to get in place in Virginia at the LEA level, the local education agency level. So we were able to accomplish that in Fairfax, as were several other school divisions in Virginia. But it was a case-by-case situation determined by the school division and their school board. But the basic advocacy that went on was at the state level. So that will vary state by state, but we were able to accomplish that with advocacy in the early 90s.
Our next question is from Madhavi, one of our participants, who would like to know what sorts of research questions do you know of, and what more generally, what is the research base that is useful in serving this population of particularly middle and high school refugee students?
I think that's a great question, Madhavi, and I wish I had a great answer to that. I think that in talking with Resene as we were looking over some of these questions, I think that one of the most useful things to do in order to make the research something that can be useful on the ground would be to talk with your local stakeholders and your state to see what questions they have and what answers could be provided to help them advocate for refugee children who are in middle school and high school. We don't have a good answer right now for that question nationally, but it's something that we can take back and think about.
And it seems as though we have folks on the research side on this call. We also have folks on the practitioner side. So sort of the flip side of that question, Melinda Bass asks, could you describe some of the topics that have been covered in professional development opportunities for public school faculties and staff? So the flip side of what sort of research might be useful to do is what kind of topics, if professional development were to be provided for practitioners in the classroom, what sort of topics would be appropriate?
Again, this is Teddy Praderas from Fairfax. We have done a number and wide variety of topics over the years and continue to evolve the kinds of professional developments we offer in this area. We've paired with different organizations with our colleagues from the Office of Refugee Resettlement at different levels to share information with teachers about characteristics of refugee students, the affective side of education, and as well as academic professional development of enhancing academic situations. As I mentioned, we've trained our ESOL teachers in providing support to students that are developing literacy for the first time at an older age. So that includes professional development focusing on the balanced literacy approach, techniques such as guided reading, and a variety of other techniques we use normally at an earlier age, but with materials that are appropriate and specific for older learners. So that is a key component to our professional development, is providing strategies of that type, but with appropriate materials, and also highlighting resources and materials that can be used with the older learner with beginning literacy skills. We also do quite a bit of professional development on teaching language through the content areas and how to work in teams and team teaching, ESOL teachers together with content area teachers, to provide ideal settings for students developing literacy while simultaneously learning content area instruction. So we do quite a bit of instruction also with our content area teachers on how to differentiate instruction for English learners as well as those with interrupted formal education.
I'm going to turn now again to another question for the ORR presenters, Lee asks if you could share anything about how sequestration might impact the Refugee School Impact Grant Program.
That's a good question, Lee. I think a lot of our stakeholders are asking the same question, and like all government agencies, we are basically looking at our programs and trying to do what's best for our populations. ORR, one thing that our director always says to our stakeholders is that ORR's entire budget is actually discretionary. We do not have any formula block grant programs. So we are unsure if any of them will be affected at this point, but we will continue to make our stakeholders aware of any decisions as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thanks. I have a couple of folks in the chat just asking about whether or not these questions and answers will be recorded, if the website will be available after the session is over. There will be an archive of the webinar on INSELA's website, and the question and answer format, you'll be able to listen to what you're listening to right now. Let me ask now, somebody has asked, in California, there are a number of laws that protect the education and the educational rights of foster youth. Are there any federal laws that pertain to education and refugees or foster youth?
I don't believe that there are any laws specifically to refugees in education. Our Unaccompanied Refugee Minor Program, which basically serve refugees who come from overseas unaccompanied by a parent, they go into URM foster care programs, which is basically a specialized foster care system in the U.S. designed to help those refugees. And those refugees can go to school and have services just like any domestic child in foster care in that state. So according to our ORR regulations on the URM program, any state with a URM program has to provide services that are comparable to the domestic child welfare program to their Title IV E and 4B programs. But other than that, I am unaware of any specific legislation.
We have a couple of specific questions about Fairfax County's programs. Mary Beth asks, what programs do you use in Fairfax for online summer ESOL courses?
We also use the Collaborate system we're using right now for this webinar. And students are able to log in and participate in online summer courses from anywhere in the world. So some of our students do go home to their home countries in the summer. Others are right here in Fairfax, or others may be visiting other parts of America, visiting relatives. And one wonderful aspect of the online summer school is that they can participate from anywhere in the world if they have internet access. Another feature of that program is that we are able to differentiate instruction online through the use of technology. So we are able to group different levels of students together within a class and differentiate both the instruction and the assessment appropriately. The online summer school was developed several years ago. It's been in place for 3 years. We offer it free of charge to students, and we are piloting at the upper elementary level as well as the secondary level. But it's been very successful in continuing language acquisition development throughout the summer months.
We also have a question about your intake assessments. Frida Barturin asks, what kind of intake assessments do you use to place SIFE students in reading and math classes?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, we are part of the WIDA consortium, And at each of our registration sites, we use the WIDA Model Assessment, M-O-D-E-L, which assesses students in reading, writing, listening, and speaking at our intake centers. So we get scores for each of those domains, as well as an overall composite score that determines their English language proficiency level. So that will include a reading score along with writing, listening, and speaking. For mathematics, we have developed our own assessments that are aligned with our math grade level standards for each grade level. We assess what we call the power standards, or the major, most important standards at each grade level. And that information is provided to teachers at the school as the students arrive at the school. So it shows teachers which standards they have already mastered and which standards they have not studied or not yet mastered. And as we know, mathematics instruction varies from country to country. So there may be students that have studied a standard that we offer at a lower grade level, or at a higher grade level. They may have studied that earlier in their home country, or they may not have studied something yet that we offer at a lower grade level. But by providing information standard by standard, teachers can see exactly which standards the students have mastered and which they have not. We have also translated and adapted those mathematic assessments into over 20 languages, and that way we are able to offer students, for the most part, a math assessment in the language in which they studied math, so that it becomes a true assessment of math and not an assessment of English proficiency. We want to focus on what we are actually trying to assess. So we've just updated those to align with our new mathematics standards in Virginia, and we're finding that assessment to be very useful.
I have another question, Teddy, again for you. Sylvia would like to know what funding sources does Fairfax County use for the schools that serve students over 18 years old?
The schools that I mentioned, our transitional program, as well as our adult education and alternative high schools, are all locally funded programs. We do supplement the transitional program with some activities and staff that is supplemented with Title III funds. However, the program itself was started with local funds, and all of our adult high school and alternative programs are all completely locally funded. We are fortunate, and as I mentioned earlier, we have strong support of our school board and our leadership team, that every student learn to their full academic potential. And so we view this as an opportunity to offer alternate programs for students that need them so they can be successful as well.
And some questions now that deal with policy aspects. Stacy Stewart would like to know, No Child Left Behind needs to be seriously modified to consider the special needs of refugee and SIFE populations. What, if anything, is being done to change the state standardized testing or assessments that are required of all students? And I'm not sure if any of our presenters today actually are in a position to answer that question. Would anyone like to comment on that?
Yeah. This is Teddy. I'll just mention that over the years we have worked very collaboratively with our SEA here in Virginia to work on developing and establishing some alternate or alternative assessments that can be used particularly with our lower level, our beginning level English language proficiency students. So together with the SEA has put in place the Virginia grade level alternative assessment, which is a reading portfolio type assessment to assess language arts skills of our beginning level LEP students. We also, in Virginia, have adopted and put into place a plain English version of each of our math grade level state assessments, as well as a plain English version of the Algebra 1 assessment. These tests test the same rigorous high-level standards as the other tests. However, there is a reduced linguistic load in the questions that is more appropriate for students that are developing English language proficiency, particularly at the lower levels. So again, the math test tests the same standards as does the Virginia grade level reading assessment, but just through alternate means.
I mean, I can, if you want. Okay. And hi, this is Millie Bentley Mammon with the Title III group at the U.S. Department of Education. And I can just give a little bit additional information in addition to what Teddy shared. And that is, first, we appreciate your point of view about the needs of refugee and SIFE students. And we have heard that before. That is definitely a concern that's been taken to the department and considered in the draft reauthorization proposal development. As you may know too, there is the flexibility that the first year of enrollment of a child in school for the newly arrived immigrant students, they would not need to be assessed in reading language arts, and for math, their score would not be included in adequate yearly progress for their first year of enrollment in U.S. schools, and that's a flexibility to Title I requirements.
Thank you, Millie. I have a follow-on question to that and a more broad and general question from Jeffrey Brokovich, who asks, what suggestions might our presenters have for schools in meeting AYP with these students, so for schools with populations of refugee or SIFE students who are struggling to meet AYP?
I would just reinforce some of the areas I was mentioning earlier, that if states have not already put in place alternate or alternative assessments for LEP students, particularly at the beginning levels of proficiency, that is something that could be addressed and looked into. It's definitely a need, not just for our students with limited previous education, but also all of our beginning level students. While they are developing their English language proficiency, taking a standardized test that only has a multiple choice format is going to be extremely challenging as our students develop their English language proficiency, and will not really fairly allow them to demonstrate what they are learning in the content area standards. So that's why it's critical that the assessment be matched appropriately to the level of proficiency of the student. So that's why in Virginia we felt it was so important to advocate for that and work with the state so that got put into place. And we are fortunate to report that that has been in place for a number of years in Virginia. But I think that's something that is needed across the country and really would be a goal to have in every state over time.
We have a question now from a community-based organization. Tarina Wong says that she is with a nonprofit whose EL program is for enrichment purposes. How might you suggest we best support ELL programs in students' respective public schools?
I think partnerships are extremely beneficial and excellent to engage in. So I think if nonprofit organizations can partner with public schools to provide supplementary services to what the students are getting during the day, that is an ideal situation. I think students in the public schools always need and can benefit from tutors, mentors, other liaisons or supplementary information that can add on to the kinds of instruction they're getting during the school. So I think collaboration with partner agencies at the local education agency level to determine what are those needs and then to focus on providing those supplementary and not duplicative services would be ideal.
Thank you. We have two questions now about the end point of programs, I suppose, and I'm going to read them both together because I think they sort of can be packaged into perhaps one response. So in Fairfax, the first one is from Maravi again. In Fairfax County, all of the different programs which are offered, the traditional, the online, the summer, the adult, and so forth, how do you find which ones have the lowest dropout and or the highest graduation rate? And then Andrea would like to know further to that, is there any research or data regarding the success of these students once they exit the programs that are provided through the public school system?
Yes, first I'll speak to the success after students exit ESOL or exit the kinds of services we provided. And I'll be talking about the program overall, all of our K-12 ESOL services. We keep close monitoring of our students at every proficiency level, as well as when they exit services and become English proficient, the level 6 in the WIDA system, who are also known as formerly LEP students. We monitor and disaggregate our data every year on our state tests to see how students at every proficiency level are doing, as well as level 6 students who have recently become proficient in English within the last 2 years. And when we compare our level 6 students who have within the last 2 years become English proficient after having been LEP, those students in all of our state tests, language arts, math, science, and social studies, perform at or above the level of their other English proficient peers in all of those areas. So we're very proud of that data. It really comes in working together with our classroom teachers. It is not the ESOL teachers alone accomplishing this goal, but it really takes the entire village working together to support students in doing that. So that is our aggregated data at the division level for students at those levels. Also, by offering the extra time that some students need to graduate, we see a 10% increase in our graduation rate between the 4-year graduation rate and the 6-year graduation rate for LEP students. Overall, our graduation rate for LEP students in 4 years, the conglomerate of all LEP students at the high school level, is 70%. But with those extra 2 years that some students need, it goes up to 80% or over. So again, we're not satisfied with that. We want to keep working until it's 100%. But in the meantime, some of the advocacy we've put in place, being able to provide those extra years to students, being able to provide a variety of different types of programs to meet their individual needs, are adding to the positive side of that statistic. So I think the key is trying to offer a variety of programs that meet the different needs of different students, and continually working in a cycle of continuous improvement to enhance the programs and systems you have in place.
That sounds like those are very positive figures. That's wonderful to hear. Dimitris Stravianidis asks that in her community they have a number of students from Haiti who arrived after the 2010 earthquake. Have these students been given refugee status, and is there any way we would know unless the students themselves tell us that they have refugee status?
That's a good question, Dimitra. The refugees who entered after the earthquake entered under a number of different ways. Some of them were granted parole, some were granted medical parole, some were granted humanitarian parole, and I believe there's also a temporary protected status that was extended to some. So a lot of the Haitian students have different immigration statuses that they're on, and I don't believe that there's any way to know unless you ask them, or unless you were to, it may be possible if their families are receiving benefits from the state refugee coordinator that you could ask the state refugee coordinator generally, maybe not on a specific student, but generally how many people they're serving in your area who's come in after the earthquake and things of that nature.
I'm going to do one more question and then maybe give the presenters a chance to wrap up and provide us with any closing remarks. Anjali Pandey would like to know, we have some high school students from Africa and Asia, particularly girls, who have never really held a pencil. Could you recommend any good books on quick and age-appropriate literacy development?
That's a good. Oops. Teddy, did you have?
Yes, I have a few that we use in our training with our teachers, our ESOL teachers, to strengthen their skills in working with students developing literacy. I'll just mention a few of the titles. One is Words Their Way with English Learners by Hellman, Bear, and Templeton. Another is called The Continuum of Literacy Learning by Fontes and Pinnell. Another is Next Steps in Guided Reading by Jan Richardson. And the fourth is Practice with Purpose by Debbie Biller. That's just some of the titles that we use with our teachers that can work with beginning literacy skills with older learners.
Just to dovetail on that, I think I pulled up a slide. I don't know if you see it, but it's the Center for Applied Linguistics slide, and I was sitting here looking on my phone trying to find different resources. They have a wealth of information on their website, and the other folks that do are BRICS, our former technical assistance provider. They had been our technical assistance provider for a long time, and they've amassed a lot of information on their website, so I would also recommend you going there.
Well, I'd like to thank all of our presenters, and I'd also like to thank our participants for a wonderful set of questions and thought-provoking questions that you've asked our presenters today. Would any of our presenters like to just wrap up, provide some closing remarks, or anything that you touched upon and were prompted to say by the questions but didn't get to say?
I would just like to say that in Fairfax here we're fortunate that we have been working with English learners and had programs in place starting with mid-1970s. And so it's really been an evolutionary process. And so we would just like to share with everyone in the webinar that, you know, we all start with, you know, very small programs and limited resources, and then just keep adding and evolving over time. And so I think it's important for us to share resources with each other and not reinvent the wheel. So I'd just like to add that we in Fairfax are very happy to share what we've developed over time, because everyone starts somewhere and then gets to add components to meet changing demographic needs. So I'd just like to reiterate, we're more than happy to share information and resources that we've developed as the needs have arisen over the last 3 or 4 decades. Thank you.
On behalf of ORR, I just want to thank you for the invitation to come in and let you know a little bit more about our populations. And we really appreciate the work that you're doing to help refugee students and other ORR eligible populations. Those students become part of our communities. And if there's any way that we can be of assistance, please use our contact information and let us know, and we'd be more than happy to help. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to our presenters today, D. Daniel Scriven and Regina Hagos from the Office of Refugee Resettlement, to Teddy Fridaris, and then let me turn back over. Joanne, would you like to make some remarks?
Bentley Mammon. Just on behalf of the department, we wanted to thank everyone for participating in and speaking at this webinar today. We really appreciate the Office of Refugee Resettlement being here, as well as Fairfax County Public Schools. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Kira.
Thank you so much. And to reiterate, the recorded webinar will be available on Incella's website. We would anticipate that being available within the next couple of days. Thank you again so much, and have a wonderful afternoon.